Hello and welcome to The World Today. I am Yero Jallo. It is a multi-million-dollar project that Ethiopia is banking on to transform the fortunes of its millions who are living in poverty. But the near completion of the construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam has sparked anger in both Sudan and particularly Egypt. The three countries have different views on how they want to benefit from the Nile in the wake of a dispute over the construction of a dam by Ethiopia. The three countries have begun a new round of negotiations to resolve the contentious issue of Ethiopia's hydroelectric dam and its impact on the water supplies being received by both Sudan and Egypt. To discuss this issue, I am joined in the studios by Demba Ali Jau, former Information Minister, and Ambassador Essa Bokar C., Deputy Chief Executive Officer of OIC Secretariat, the Gambia, and Coordinator of Security Affairs. But before we delve into the discussion, let's look at the issues at the heart of the dispute between Ethiopia on one hand and Sudan and Egypt on the other. Sudan and Egypt are worried that the construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam will limit the access to water from the Nile and pose a serious threat to their populations. Ethiopia is hoping that the new project will help transform the economy and help in poverty reduction through the provision of cheap electricity supply to the millions of its over 100 million population. But what is the next after these latest rounds of talks for these three countries? Gentlemen, welcome to the program, The World Today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin by asking, this is a major dispute that has the potential to trigger a regional conflict.
Mm-hmm.
What is your take? DA?
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. This Ethiopian dam has the potential actually to trigger a regional conflict between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, and maybe the surrounding countries as well. But of course, when you mention the Nile and you mention Egypt, definitely there is a lot of interconnectivity here. Because when every time you mention the Nile, Egypt is the first country that comes to mind.
Absolutely.
Because it is on the mouth of the Nile, and it's a very, very important source of water for Egypt. And anything that would disturb the flow of the water, within the Nile, definitely is a big worry to Egypt. That's why Egypt is leading trying to get Ethiopia either to abandon the dam altogether or to see how best they can be able to, use it in such a way that it's not going to disturb the water flow into the Nile to reach Egypt, because as they said, is the source of water, agriculture and everything for Egypt. So that is a very, very volatile situation, and I only hope and pray that the three countries as well as the African Union will see how best they can be able to go around the issue so that it is not going to cause any problem within the region.
Three countries and a dispute. Sudan is also now surfacing in this issue.
Yes.
Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jallo, and thank you, Honorable Jal. Well, I think the common acronym for it is GAD. They call it the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Well, you're right. It's not only, in fact, a regional conflict. This can be a regional conflict which crosses borders, not physical conflict crossing borders, but when you look at it, Ethiopia insisting on going ahead with the dam, which also involves certain mechanisms in the area of engineering and stuff like that, which other countries, particularly Egypt, would find that it may deny it the flow it has been enjoying for years now. Of course, the River Nile might have been named the River Nile. When you look at the history of the river, it might not even have been the same name before, during the Pharaonic era. So, and if you look at it, America is warning that they are going to stop their aid towards the dam if Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt do not come to an agreement, which I commend the U.S. for, because had they been doing that, or other sponsors of certain projects in certain regions, had they been doing that, it might have been a way of avoiding or averting conflicts. I mean, because that means we are not going to go ahead and give you the money when actually, after giving you all the money, you build the dam, it may be a conflict, and next minute you will see a plane fly and then bomb the dam, which will be losses on all from all sides and all angles. And I think that the Nile, like Honorable said, is not only a source of survival like agriculture. It is also, the Nile of what they call it, the Nile of the papyrus, is where you have the grass that they used to make paper from and all this stuff. So it's a very beneficial river. So I think they should sit down and talk about it to avoid a conflict, because any conflict that is between Sudan, that cake powder has been sparked already. Sudan's cake powder has been sparked. So Ethiopia and Eritrea, I mean, we all know the conflicts that were happening between these two countries. So these are not the most stable areas, and then Egypt also is not a turbulent country, but we know the things that are at stake. Yeah.
Interesting. DA, let's discuss this main issue here. The three countries want to harness the Nile for different reasons. Of course, Ethiopia mainly for electricity and job creation, Sudan and Egypt for agricultural purposes. How can they judiciously share these resources without harming or harming the interests of the other?
The Nile is the longest river in the world. It has its sources all the way in the DR Congo and other places. So there are several countries within that area which actually are connected to the Nile, and they are benefiting from the Nile in different ways. But as I said, definitely Egypt is very, very, very much identical with the Nile. When you, all the time you mention the Nile, Egypt is the first country that you will think about. But as I tell you, there are many other countries within the sub-region which actually within the source of the Nile. It comes all the way from the DRC area, and then it empties into the Mediterranean to Egypt. Okay. So you see, all these countries have one connection or the other with the Nile. But these three countries are one of the three of the most important countries that actually make the best use of the Nile in different ways. As you say, others do it for electricity. Like Ethiopia is they are using their dam maybe for generating electricity and maybe irrigation and things like that. Egypt also they have got the Aswan Dam as well. It's all within the Nile, and they are using the Nile also for various other reasons, particularly in the agricultural irrigation and other things. And the Sudan as well is the same situation. So you see, I think the best thing is that they need to sit down and see how best they can be able to utilize the resources within the Nile judiciously, so that they are not going to harm each other. But if each one of them wants to go their own way, do what they want to do, regardless of the consequences on the others, that is definitely a prescription for disaster or conflict within the region. And that, I think, the AU and the UN and all other regional organizations should definitely come together and see how best they can be able to bring these three countries together, so that they can discuss and see how best they can be able to avoid any kind of conflict.
Also, if I may ask, how can these three countries share these resources judiciously without harming the interests of each other?
Well, I would bring back the old phrase, preventive diplomacy, because that's the only thing that's at stake here. I think exactly as Honorable has outlined it, partitioning the interest among themselves, but identifying, I would say, each one of them would identify their interest and then come to the very meaning of diplomacy, because it's reciprocity and interest.
But diplomacy has been in play, because the main protagonists, that is Egypt and Ethiopia, have been negotiating for years, and to find an amicable solution to the problem.
Correct.
But yet still, nothing much is not achieved. Well, diplomatically.
Yes, I think, but diplomacy is not a lightning process. It is an ongoing process in any situation, because one of the best subjects that you can call patience for is diplomacy. Because if you're not patient, you cannot be a diplomat. I mean, that's outright. I mean, one has to. So what they need to do, though, most countries, the reason why conflicts are not resolved is that they don't get to the core of the causes. And even if they want to get to the core of the causes, some of them would fall short of mentioning certain causes if they would know that it will end up being apportioning blame. So I think if they are to get to the core of what brought all this about, each one of them will identify and see how much they will seek a peace for harmony, for understanding. Because if you look at it this way, I mean, Egypt has its interest, Ethiopia has its interest, Sudan has its interest. So one of them saying that I don't care about the other's interest, that's not good cohabitation. Absolutely. I mean, so I think I believe that if they look deep inside, they will know that Egypt cannot go without Sudan, Sudan cannot go without Egypt, because they are interconnected because of the river Nile. And you know, the river Nile is not the only river in the world. You know, there is one person who projected into the future. He said, the conflicts of today are caused by territory and oil. He said the conflicts of the future are going to be caused by water.
Okay, interesting. D. Yeah. You can diplomacy come to play here?
Oh yes, I mean, just as Ambassador Sia has said, diplomacy has been ongoing. You know, I mean, we've been hearing about discussions between Ethiopia and Egypt and Sudan. They've been sitting around the table discussing this issue for quite a while. Even though, you know, the problems have not been resolved through diplomacy, but as he said, it definitely requires patience. And I'm sure eventually they will come to realize that, you know, it's better they talk, you know, discuss the issue and see how amicably they could be able to resolve the issue than going to war. Because when they go to war, I mean, there is not going to be any winner in this case, you know, they'll just end up destroying the infrastructure and things like that. And then, I mean, that's going to harm all of them. You know, they are so interconnected. The Nile is the connecting factor here. And it's extremely important that each one of them thinks about the consequences of whatever they are doing with regards to the Nile. I mean, what it will do to the others and others. So I mean, if they do that, definitely, I am quite positive that diplomacy will work eventually.
Ambassador,
yes.
The source of the Nile comes from Ethiopia. Does that give Addis Ababa more leverage in the negotiations?
I don't think so, because I think geographically, every river has a source. But it's just like today, if you tell me the source of the river Gambia, the fresh part of it, it ended the Guinea,
from the Fujian Islands.
The Fujian Islands. I doubt if Sekoture has ever come to Gambia and tell us that because the source is from me, I have to control from Koina to, I think Honorable will agree with me on that one. So I think the source is one thing. But you see, these are natural things that, like they philosophically say, evolution does not know morality. I mean, when the source came, the river was flowing, it went through all these places, and then it is there for everybody. It's just like, let me give you another example. Where is the source of the sun? Solar system, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think any country can tell us that because of the source. I mean, had there been a country up there, and then you tell us that, okay, because this I'll do, you know, those are, I think Ethiopia should understand what is at stake for them. What is at stake for them is more serious. They need to sit down and look at what is at stake for them. It is, yes, but even if it is a source is in Ethiopia, can they stop the Nile to flow?
No.
They cannot.
Absolutely.
And then here is America saying, if Ethiopia and Sudan and Egypt do not agree, they are going to hold their hands, they are not going to give them any funding. And I think it will be somehow an adventure into lost illusions if they sit there and think that, okay, the source is from here, we are Ethiopia, we'll go ahead with the dam, and you don't have the funds, and the one who is giving you the funds said, we prefer stability and peace before we give you the funds. Then they'll be obliged to stop whether they want it or not.
Interesting. Does that give Addis Ababa more leverage in the negotiations?
No, I don't think so. I mean, as Ambassador Sia has said, definitely this is a natural phenomenon. The Nile is a natural phenomenon, and there is no way that, I mean, Addis Ababa can stop the flow of the Nile. They cannot stop it. Probably they can be able to reduce the flow, the velocity of the flow from one area to the other. Maybe by the time it reaches Egypt, probably it would have been a bit reduced, but definitely they cannot stop the flow of the Nile. And as I said, the source of the Nile actually not even in Ethiopia, is well beyond Ethiopia. Even other countries, Uganda, South Sudan and DR Congo are all within the Nile area, and that's where the water is coming from. It's just passing through all these countries as well. So I think it's always good. It's definitely in the interest of Ethiopia and all the other countries within the region to sit down and discuss how best they can be able to, this is a natural resource, how they can be able to, share the benefits of the natural resource, which is the river Nile. But if one country thinks that they can be able to control it and manipulate it the way they want to their advantage, it is definitely not going to work.
Now, with all these with all the three countries set for talks to find an agreement to use the Nile, individual countries and leadership being sincere about finding a compromise agreement on the water sharing agreement, considering the fact that they have different ideas of how the water is used?
Well, here I would bring in what I call the pyramid of priorities. You see, these countries, these individual countries that are involved in it, each one of them, I believe, every morning, or let's say every day, they have what they call their briefings or debriefings for leadership. I think, let's say, for example, what you were asking, alluded to earlier on, like if they would be able to stop the flow, like Honorable was saying. Even if they are to be able to have the mechanism to redirect or to reduce the velocity and all that, but wouldn't that be more expensive than going in for a dam? Because I think if you want to divert and reduce the velocity of the flow, that's too huge a project. So I think you're doing it simply because of what? So I think the honest truth is, if they cannot agree, what they should organize is a sub-regional conference among themselves. As I always said when we were talking about ECOWAS, they have to have a hard talk session. This is needed in Africa because people have to be seeing the interest. Because Ethiopia will not back down, but Egypt also will not back down. Sudan won't back down because every leader, your first priority is the interest of your citizen, isn't it? So I think they should understand one thing: conflicts cannot help them utilize the Nile. No, because today, let's say for example, if any other country that produces harmful weapons like toxic waste, if they saw a vessel coming from another country that wants to dump some toxic waste in the Nile, Sudan will not allow it.
Absolutely.
Egypt will not allow it. Ethiopia will not allow it. So that adverse effect should bring them together to know that they have a common cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Let's look at this in this other angle. With Egypt relying on the Nile for almost 97% of its water supply, does that also put it on a more disadvantageous, considering the fact that they have different? Considering the fact that negotiating an agreement with Ethiopia.
Yes, I agree.
Looking at the dependency.
I agree. Egypt is definitely much more dependent on the Nile than any of the other countries concerned. But all the same, I think it's important that they have this regional agreement on the issue, because if it affects Egypt seriously, it's definitely going to affect the other countries in any way that you can think about. So I think it's important. It's always important that they sit down, discuss the issues, and see how best they can be able to tackle it as a region, rather than each country trying to go in their own way. It is not in the interest of any one of them, definitely. Yeah.
Is Egypt at a disadvantageous stage when negotiating with Ethiopia regarding this Nile issue because of the dependency?
If I were to be part of their team negotiating, what I would prepare for is to convince the other country that, we built our, because Honorable said that Egypt has a dam too, which is something, the Aswan Dam, which is from the Nile. So I'm pretty sure that, I'm not during their negotiation, but I'm sure that Ethiopia will be referring to that all the time.
I think Ethiopia, that is where Ethiopia is basing their...
No, what I'm saying, but that dam doesn't affect Ethiopia.
Exactly.
Because the flow comes from Ethiopia.
Exactly.
And then by the time it reaches the Aswan Dam, all the rest is Egypt.
But now,
so,
but now if you are part of the negotiation, you always look for what they call the snipers and the grenades of negotiation. So they will use that as their sniper, because they will say, okay, you have a dam, even though you know technically it doesn't affect. But remember, these are leaders also who are elected. They will be speaking to the masses to a point where they will say, you see, yes, they are right. They have their own dam. They don't want us to have our own dam. Now you need to prepare yourself technically to explain. The other advantage the disadvantage for Egypt is if they fail this negotiation, or if this project goes ahead, I personally sail on the Nile. I'm pretty sure that I won't be surprised if Honorable, I was on the Nile itself. So seeing the Nile and all this of Egypt doesn't only need the Nile for agriculture, but I agree with you, 95% of
almost 97%
is sources of water.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you one thing, one of the best fruits you can eat in the world is the fruits from that Nile. And then it is also for tourism. So it's two-way. Egypt gains agriculture and then gains from tourism of that Nile. So I think they have more things at stake, I would say, at this point than Sudan would. These two countries, Ethiopia and Egypt.
The parties are using a framework in finding a legally binding agreement. Will that be viable solution to the dispute?
Yeah, I think it is. It is viable. I think it's the only alternative. Definitely finding a viable solution to to the regional issues concerned, as far as the Nile is concerned. That is the only viable solution, as far as I'm concerned. Because definitely, it's not a question of Egypt being maybe assuming that they are militarily more powerful, going to destroy the Ethiopian dam. That is just going to cause more chaos within the. So the best way they can go about is to negotiate and see how best they can be able to come to an amicable agreement and see how best they can be able to share the resources of the Nile amongst them and all the regional countries as well.
Ambassador, this is where diplomacy comes to play here. Would it work?
Yes, but my only thing is that I wish African Union will man up on this for this one and resolve it, rather than staying there again until something starts and then they start issuing statements, press releases here and there. I mean, I think now that at least we have seen what is at stake, that is a brewing conflict. This is where preventive diplomacy is highly needed, because that's why it is called preventive diplomacy. It's a self-explanatory term, isn't it, Honorable?
Yeah, it is.
Because so now, this is the time that diplomats should show that they are capable, rather than sit until there is a consequence and you come and start talking about it, weeping over all the whole wall. I mean, and then I wish they wouldn't sit there until the Security Council of the United Nations will tell them, oh, okay, come here. I have respect for the Security Council, but I think there are so many problems. I mean, this is not the only river. There are issues with the Caspian Sea. There are issues with the River Jordan. There are issues with the Red Sea. There are issues with South China, sea. A lot of places where water and land, territory, expansion of territory, that's why they call it geostrategic arena. This is no longer geopolitics only. This is a combination again of precipitants within the geostrategic arena and precipitants within the geopolitical arena, and they have to use this diplomatically to solve it. I really want to see where we'll be averting war, because war, like I said the last time, it means the simple meaning of war is our past savagery, which we have not done away with. We still have the same savagery in us. We just have more sophisticated weapons. I don't think we should be resorting to war at any time there are conflicts.
Looking at the how tension is mounting in that part of Africa, would diplomacy work?
Yes, I'm still convinced that diplomacy will work. And in fact, it is the only solution to the problem there, diplomacy. There is no other way. I mean, you cannot solve the matter militarily or any other way. It must be through diplomacy, because, we don't expect the three countries to go to war just because Ethiopia has filled its dam. Definitely, that is not going to solve the problem. So they need to sit down. I mean, as Ambassador says, the AU definitely should be very proactive in this situation and see how best they can able to bring the three countries together and sit down and find an amicable solution to the problem. That is the only alternative.
Great. There are some high stakes and geopolitical permutations regarding this issue. How worrying is the dispute over the use of the Nile?
Well, I mean, if you think global, yeah, you should be worried. If you think local also, you should be worried. Because local here are the three individual nations. Globally, we will be affected. Because whether we know it or not, we will be. I once wrote something short when the Sudan war began. I said that's what I call the spillover effect. You see, there is no conflict in the world that doesn't affect the other. I remember when the signals of the Ukraine war started, I spoke to some people, and then they were telling me that, I said, look, we have the North Sea pipe and all this, but at that time many people didn't understand. I said the spillover will come and affect us. Now how about it? The wheat. We all feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
DA, let me just dribble around this and talk about the main issues that triggered the dispute. Let's try and see whether there are any potential solutions here. What would be the role of the UN, AU, or other regional bodies such as the IGAD? Can an independent mediation help in settling this dispute?
Yes, definitely. I believe it can play its part. I mean, IGAD is very pivotal here because it is a regional group which actually groups all those three countries together. IGAD, and then then the AU is the African body itself. So I think these two bodies definitely have a big role to play. But I mean, as I said, definitely it is the only solution. Diplomacy here. Bringing the three leaderships, the three countries together to discuss the issue and find an amicable solution. But these two organizations definitely have a very pivotal role to play in it.
Briefly, Ambassador.
Yes, IGAD, AU, but my belief is that to add more weight to what Honorable was saying, the first solution of conflict or the conflict resolution is in the mind. I think the future of Ethiopia, the future of Sudan, the future of Egypt is found in the mind of the Egyptian, in the Sudanese, and the Ethiopian.
Finally, before we take leave of you, we're almost running out of time. In the event they fail to agree on legally binding agreement on sharing, what will happen?
Well, I think where legally binding matters fail, I hope before they arrive at legally binding matters, they would just use diplomacy. Because diplomacy will encumber all that. Conflict resolution, legality, preparing MOUs, and then structures here and there. Because if that fails, what is legal fails, what you should resort to is to go to a place where they will use that very structure there will be an arbiter. Where there is an arbiter, and then the referee will say you are on the right track, this person on the wrong track, and all that. But if that also fails, the last stage is they will go to war. But I don't believe what people always say. They said on the list, the last resort is war. No, in any list, the first resort is negotiation, and the last resort is negotiation.
Briefly.
Yes, I definitely agree with him there. Because here. Negotiations have to go on first. Diplomacy is the beginning, and then after diplomacy, you agree, have an agreement, then you come to maybe signing some legal binding stuff. But diplomacy is definitely the beginning, and it should be the end as well. So that is the solution to the issue.
Well, gentlemen, that is why we're going to draw the curtains on this edition of The World Today. We thank you very much for being part of this show. You can also follow us online at www.grts.gm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and liking. We thank you so much for watching. From me, Yero Jallo. Bye for now.